During the rise of high-caliber artillery guns in the late 19th century, the Prussians began looking for a colossus weapon that could completely obliterate modern concrete fortifications built by the French forces near the German borders. The result of a decade of meticulous testing was the M-Gerät, a 42-centimeter caliber howitzer capable of firing shells at a range of up to 9.5 kilometers. The powerful artillery guns were eventually baptized as Big Berthas. Footage taken by the American forces at the Argonne Sector gives a glimpse of the sheer size and lethality of these colossal guns and their devastating shells. By the time World War I broke out, the Prussians were eager to put their new powerful weapon to the test. '20th century artillery. Artillery and fortifications technology took a giant leap during the mid-18th century. The Prussian, French, British, Russian, and American militaries then started an arms race that slowly led to a revolutionary use of artillery on the battlefield. The most significant offensive innovations came directly from the railroads. Just like the antique roads built by the Romans during their dominance over Europe and the known world, modern railroads became a symbol of progress and civilization. Besides armored trains, the European militaries also began developing railroad artillery guns that could be easily transported to the battlefield for added mobility. Rifled artillery allowed invading armies to fire their arsenal outside the range of fortress guns, which rendered their defenses useless. As a result, these new offensive countermeasures led to an updated study in fortifications to develop technologies that could effectively withhold them. Consequently, military architects replaced the construction of 16th century star-shaped forts in favor of evolved polygonal ones. In these late 18th century fortifications, artillery guns were mounted in armored, rotating casemates that favored the coverage area that the defensive ordnance provided. Then, in the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War, the French animosity towards Germany and its unification under the Prussian Empire led to increasing tensions at the borders between both nations. Thus, France and Belgium began to build extensively fortified zones in case they went to war against Prussia. Most of these defenses compromised the new type of concrete fortifications, and as a result, Chief of the General Staff Helmut von Moltke urged the Kaiser and the Prussian military to develop powerful artillery guns capable of pummeling French defenses. Moltke's successor, Field Marshal Alfred von Schlieffen, considered that powerful artillery was essential for his ultimate plan to destroy France, and the once powerful 21-centimeter field howitzer employed by the Germans had lost its might at the turn of the century. Something had to be done. Beta and Gamma Gerät. In cooperation with Krupp AG, the Artillery Test Commission, or ATC, began preliminary studies on a high-caliber artillery gun in the 1890s. The result was the Beta Gerät, a 30.5-centimeter mortar that was not enough to destroy the French and Belgian forts, despite its power and range. The development of an improved Beta Gerät gun then began in the early 1900s. The ATC suggested a 45-centimeter gun, but the Army preferred a 42-centimeter artillery cannon. Design and testing commenced in 1906 and would go on until 1911. All the extensive testing resulted in the 42-centimeter Gamma Gerät, or Gamma Device Siege Gun. It was the largest artillery piece ever fielded by the Germans at the time, measuring over 13.5 meters in length and 4.25 meters in height. The Gamma had a maximum firing range of 14,000 kilometers and could effectively outrange and destroy French defenses. Still, it had a terrible disadvantage in its weight. At 150 long tons, the Gamma device was not easy to move, and it took almost 24 hours to prepare it for firing. Additionally, it could only be emplaced close to rail lines, significantly limiting its mobility. In 1908, Krupp started developing a similar Gamma gun that could be transported by gun carriage while retaining the impressive firepower of the Gamma Gerät. And although the first prototypes and tests would prove unsuccessful, Krupp and the Commission would eventually triumph with their M-Gerät variant. The mighty M-Gerät. In autumn of 1911, the powerful 42-centimeter M-Gerät was introduced to the Prussian military. After meticulous testing, Kaiser Wilhelm II personally congratulated Krupp and the army for the magnificent achievement. The M-Gerät weighed over 47 tons, and it was 10 meters long, 4.5 meters tall, and 4.7 meters wide. The gun was placed on a steel base with a spade for bracing, which could be lifted while the gun was emplaced, giving it a traverse of 360 degrees. The 5-meter-long barrel had an elevation of 65 degrees, a range of almost 9,500 kilometers, and it could fire up to 8 shells per hour. In addition, the weapon had an incredible muzzle velocity of 815 meters per second. The artillery piece was towed in 5 wagons, each one specifically made to store a unique part of the Gerät. The unique weapons were towed by special gas-powered tractors that also had wheels with articulated feet to move the Gerät across rough terrain. Also, the M-Gerät could fire up to 3 types of projectiles, including high explosive, armor-piercing, and intermediate rounds. The first 2 were highly effective against concrete and metal armor and could penetrate up to 12 meters, while the intermediate rounds had a ballistic tip and were used for increased accuracy and range. Big Bertha goes to war. When the global conflict broke out in 1914, the Prussian Empire had 18 M-Geräts in 10 siege batteries. One of them was the coastal mortar, which comprised 2 Geräts. Then, on August 4th, the German forces arrived at the Belgian city of Liège as part of Schlieffen's plan to destroy France by crossing through Belgium. Some M-Geräts were part of the artillery battery KMK-3 and soon began pummeling the Belgian defenses. The powerful cannons then bombarded Fort de Pontis on August 12th and forced it to surrender after 2 days of shelling. The damage to the thick walls of the Belgian defenses left the German soldiers astonished, who then nicknamed the powerful M-Geräts as Dicke Bertha, or Big Berthas. Fort de Lier and Fort de Lausanne followed Pontis's fate a week later. After firing 24 shells into Lausanne, one of the rounds struck a magazine that produced an internal explosion that destroyed the entire fort. Then, after the Germans stormed Namur on August 20th, the Big Berthas were used to open fire against the fort of Marchauvelet, which was also destroyed by a magazine explosion. Fort de Mézeray then surrendered days later before Belgium was overwhelmed. During the first days of September, the French and British forces got a taste of the Big Berthas when they were besieged at Maubeuge. The Sarthe, Serfontaine, Lavaux, and Héron-Fontaine forts then capitulated one after the other by September 8th. The Big Berthas then increased their streak at Antwerp after destroying Fort de Lier, Kessel, and De Brocham, causing the Belgians to retreat. Last days. During 1915, several Big Berthas were sent to the Eastern Front, where they pummeled the firmly dug-in Russian forces at Przemyśl. The artillery destroyed over 6 forts before the Russians withdrew and allowed the Germans to retake the sector. During the August advance, the Berthas also unleashed their power into Kaunas Fortress before moving on to seize Novogeorgievsk. Then, in 1916, KMK Battery 3 and its squad of Berthas became part of the terrible artillery barrages that decimated the armies of Europe during the battles of Verdun and the Somme. However, their luck would turn beginning in 1917, when the Berthas suffered several losses after many shells exploded before they left the barrel, and several others were destroyed by the British near Ostend in August. Footage shot by the U.S. military salvage activities in the Meuse-Argonne Sector in 1918 shows some of the Berthas taken after the ceasefire agreement. Besides the snapshots of the colossal guns and their firing bases, U.S. personnel are seen posing with the shells fired by the weapons, with one of them boasting a written inscription with the name Big Bertha as a soldier poses next to it. Additionally, the footage shows American servicemen piling up the hundreds of rounds left unfired by the German forces. After the final German offensive in July of 1918, 2 intact Berthas and their crews were taken by the U.S. Army forces at Spincourt. They were then brought to the U.S. to be evaluated by artillery specialists and to develop a weapon of similar capabilities at the Aberdeen Proving Ground facility in Maryland. Both were scrapped in 1943, but years later, war veteran Emil Cherubin built a replica and toured it across Germany as a testimony of authentic German craftsmanship. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And let us know in the comments below what you think of Big Bertha and its use during World War I. Also hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest content. Stay tuned.